My dear brothers and sisters, what a privilege it is to welcome you. This news program seeks to inform, uplift, and inspire. So let's get to it. So whether you are tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
Those intros just give me flashbacks to watching conference over the last couple decades. They're just fabulous. Welcome, everybody, to the Mormon Newscast. It is Monday. It is April 21st. It's 6 p.m. Mountain Time. It's sometime wherever you guys are. And we are here together. I have my wonderful co-host. I have Radio Free Mormon. How are you and how was your Easter?
Well, the song says it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but it literally is 5 o'clock here. So cheers to you, Rebecca. Good evening.
And how was your Easter? I'm checking on both of you.
Oh, it was great. I had a wonderful Easter weekend. That's because we did the Easter egg hunt on Saturday because of conflicts of one or another, but Saturday was the day with the good weather.
Perfect. I love it. And Bill, how are you and how was your Easter weekend?
My Easter weekend was, I'm doing great. My Easter weekend was exceptional. I was in Vegas spending time with our dear friend, Randall Bell.
Oh, I can't think of anything better. Hi, Randy.
I'm trying not to look jealous.
Exactly. And mine was also fabulous. There was a little bit of rain and snow where I was, but other than that, it was all good. So anyway, I was looking through the slides earlier, kind of prepping, and this is quite the show. There's going to be a lot here to talk about. So you are not going to want to step away for any reason, I would say. So
no going to the bathroom during the newscast tonight.
I was trying to allude to that. That's right. And Bill has put up on the screen very quickly, if you can't get enough of the Mormon Newscast, you don't have to worry about that this week, because coming up on Thursday, which is April 24th, we are going to be live streaming the Fairview Planning and Zoning meeting, where they're going to be going over the new application that the church has submitted for the reduced size temple. And it's going to be open to public comment. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. You're not going to want to miss this. So we'll be putting out more information, but just kind of make a mental note, put it on your calendar. This is on Thursday. This is going to be quite something. Let's see, what do we have next? And then again, if you can't get enough of the Mormon Newscast, of course, we'll be back on April 28th for our regular Monday installment. But then on Tuesday, back to Fairview, back to a live stream. And this time it's the town council meeting where the final decision will be made. So this is something you're not going to want to miss. So put both of those on your calendars, and even my dog Alice is barking in anticipation, knowing how supercharged this is. So put those on your calendars and we'll get more information out later. What are we going to be talking about tonight? Like I said, we have quite a number of topics. There was a lot of news. Bill is going to take the lead story, which is religion is good for you, with a question mark after that. I'm going to be covering McKinney, Texas, and the Nairobi temple updates and a few other temple things that kind of came in at the last minute. RFM is going to be covering the tithing lawsuit against the LDS Church has been dismissed. Last week, our headline was case one. This week, a little bit of a different outcome. So
you win some, you lose some, Rebecca.
That's it. That actually should have been the title there. So, but you're going to take us through all those details. And then I'm going to talk about an LDS seminary building that is causing some controversy. It seems like I always talk about the church building things. I don't know why. It's my little niche, right? That's what I do. We're going to talk about Mormon studies, losing a giant, and then a final little note, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So like I said, we have a lot to cover. Before we dive into our main story, we have a couple little updates. One, I'm sure most of you heard today the sad news that Pope Francis has passed away. Actually, just this morning or whatever time it would be. I couldn't quite tell from the news, the time difference, what time it would be. But he's passed away, and he was just an amazing, wonderful person. And the note that I had to take when I went to the different news sources is that here in Utah, in the Tribune and the Deseret News, they couldn't mention his passing without also remembering the 2019 visit of President Nelson. They both had big articles about that. Somebody in the comments on social media said, wow, they just can't not make it about themselves, can they? Which I thought was funny. But we remember that visit. They post that picture all the time. And I think it's even more meaningful now that we are noticing this Christianization of the LDS Church. This meeting with the Pope perhaps was even more meaningful. But this is exciting. Have either of you seen the movie Conclave?
No, but it was that handshake from President Nelson that allowed the Pope to live longer than he otherwise would have.
That could have been it. That could have been it. But the way that they choose the new Pope is extremely interesting. If you haven't seen the movie Conclave, I don't think it's in theaters anymore. You can probably stream it somewhere, but it's pretty fascinating and very different, of course, from how the LDS prophet arrives at the position that he's at for life, right? So it's pretty fascinating the way they choose it if you want to look into that. So anyway, just take note, and Pope Francis, and there will be a new Pope on the horizon. We're not sure when, but we'll be watching that closely. Another quick little update. I just wanted to check in with everybody on Easter. Yesterday was Easter Sunday, and as we reported the week before, Christian Easter was at a fever pitch. So I kind of dug around social media, talked to some people that had actually gone to church. I wanted to see if President Oaks's, he admonished everyone to use that greeting, "He is risen." He is risen, right? And I wanted to know if that had happened. So I kind of combed through social media, and I found that for the most part, people did not do that in their LDS wards. I found one instance where a bishop had announced from the pulpit, "Please, everybody use this greeting." So then the people kind of felt obligated. There was some awkwardness. Another person did it sort of like you would do aloha, "He is risen," and expected everybody call in response. Mormons aren't necessarily great at that, so that didn't go over well. The one thing that I did notice is an uptick in people writing it out. Like you might get an Easter text. The Easter text that I received from faithful friends and family said, "He is risen." So I think maybe that was used a little bit more, just in text and written form. So I don't know if you guys noticed anything, or maybe you were not even tracking it like I was.
Rebecca, I did not go to an LDS church yesterday, but I did go to a free Methodist church, a free Methodist church. And there was a lot of "He is risen" going on.
Of course, other traditions do it. It's just very foreign and new to the LDS members.
I thought you went to a church with free meth. I was sort of interested there for a moment, but
waiting for him to finish that. Yes.
I'll only say your rituals are always cool. Other people's rituals are always weird. And when you're asked to do someone else's ritual, it just doesn't go over well.
Yeah, it's a little awkward. It's kind of like the hallelujah shout, right? There's a little awkwardness there. And the other thing I thought was very interesting is that somebody posted this, and I picked it up. This is a meeting house, maybe a stake center, a meeting house, and there is a wooden cross right there in the entryway. Now, I think this is part of what we talked about. Remember the walk through Jesus's life? They were inviting people. It's kind of an open house where you'd have different rooms of the things that happened throughout that week. And I feel like this probably is where they would take people out and show them the cross. If you look at a wider view of the church, there's a tomb over on the right-hand side. But, that was on Saturday when they were having people do that. This is Easter Sunday morning, and they did not take this down. There is a wooden cross. This is in the Bay Area in front of a meeting house. So I feel like a lot of people are rolling over in their graves on that. So anyway, let us know in the chat, did you see anything like this, the Christianization of Easter, if you guys happen to be in any meetings? So
Rebecca,
yes.
Mormons would find it uncomfortable to say "He is risen," just saying it. But if they raise their hands and lower them and say it 3 times, "He is risen, He is risen," no problem. Mormons will do that all day long.
There's a little bit of a juxtaposition there, isn't there? So, all right, we have one announcement left before we get to our main story. And I think this is kind of Bill and RFM talking about this. And this is kind of a little more serious nature. So everybody listen up for sure on this one. I'll let you guys take this one away.
All right, I'll just note this happened back on March 26th of this year. So about a month ago, just under a month ago. And this was at the time where Dives Lazarus, also known as Burke Sorensen, did an episode on his Mormon book review where he was talking about Steve Pinecker and Pinecker's mother. And I know Steve was hurt by that incident. RFM and I talked about it, I think, on Mormonism After Dark that week and had a conversation. The very next day, this email came in to Steve Pinecker. And Steve sent it to me, but I didn't see it. I only saw this recently. I saw this 2 days ago, I think, because Steve reached out to me about something else. And when I opened up my text message, I saw what he was asking. I thought it was connected to the thing just above it. I thought it had all come in 2 days ago. And so my response to Steve was, Steve, this is not my email. Steve was asking me, is this you? And I started to read it. I thought, I remember this incident, but I don't remember writing Steve. and this isn't quite the way I would word something, and I didn't have this sort of motivation. So Steve asked if this was my email, and suddenly I look up and I see the email address. It says Bill Reel, but it says billreelmd@gmail.com. My email address is billreeljr@gmail.com, or the Mormon Discussions with an S on the end, podcast with an S on the end @gmail.com.
MD, like Mormon Discussions.
Yes. So this is not my email. Somebody was trying to reach out to Steve Pinecker, pretending to be me. And so when this happened a couple of days, again, it happened a month ago, but when I saw it a couple of days ago and responded to Steve, I immediately put a post on Facebook and other places. I reached out to you guys on the newscast, reached out to a couple of other text groups where I participate with Mormon content creators, just to give them the heads up that, number one, if any emails are going out claiming to be me, be sure it's coming from my email address. And two, is to just be careful. There might be this person out there impersonating other content creators as well and trying to stir things up. But I thought I'll turn the time over to you, RFM. There's you wanted to read it and say something about it, and I'll let you do that.
Yeah, this is the text of the email, once again, sent to Stephen Pinecker on March 26, 2025 at 8:22 p.m. and from a fake Bill Reel email address. Hello, Steve. RFM caught your latest episode of Mormon Book Reviews with Jim Bennett and forwarded me your Facebook post. And I'm so sorry that all of this is happening to you. I'm sending this from my personal email. By the way, I'm so glad to see that John DeLynn is waiting in. I think it's time to rally the ex-Mormon community and call out Dives for his truly vile behavior in a more substantial way. We want to do Mormonism Live episode detailing his harmful actions, not only towards you, but also your mother, hurricane survivors, and many, many others. There's a whole list of people he has wronged, and we might try to get one or two of them on the show as well, but we are still working out the details. So all I want to say about this, first off, Bill, you did not write this.
No, that's not my email. I've never had an email address like that. You can look it up. I've certainly never publicized something like that. I wouldn't create a fake email address to send some behind. I would have sent, if I had these feelings, I just would have said it's to Steve Pinecker. I just learned this 2 days ago.
The answer is no. You didn't write that.
Somebody's impersonating me.
The answer is no. And you didn't give anybody permission to impersonate you, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay, all I want to say out here is if anybody out there has any information as to who it is who wrote this fake email to Steve Pinecker in Bill Reel's name using a manufactured email address, would you contact Bill Reel? Let him know, because I will tell you that the last time I checked, identity theft was still a crime. And if this email crossed state boundaries, then it's a federal offense. Just thought I would mention it.
All right.
Well, yeah. Thank you for that PSA. And, you have to so carefully, I'll say this, if something doesn't sound like the person that you're used to communicating with, don't make an assumption. Contact that person through the channels that you will actually reach them. If the email doesn't sound quite right, find another way and reach out and say, Bill, did you send this to me? It's so important to always, this is cybersecurity stuff, right? And a lot of us have training through our jobs on this. Always check the email. It can be off 1 or 2 letters, and you can go down a very dark rabbit hole. You can lose information. It can be scary. And so I'm glad you talked about this, and just everybody be careful. Double check with the person. If it doesn't quite sound like them, or they're asking you to do something that doesn't sound like something they would ask, I think it's really important. So
good advice, Rebecca.
I know I'm going to go back and check every email Bill has ever sent me, because now I'm questioning. I'm going to look for that for sure. All right. Now I think we'll just head on to our main story, which is Bill is going to cover this. Really interesting.
All right. I won't spend a ton of time on this. It was a long write-up, but it was all written by Lauren Jackson. She's been spending an entire year. She is, I don't know exactly where she stands in her own beliefs, but she at least was or is a Latter-day Saint. She writes for the New York Times. She's been spending a year on reporting on religious belief. And this article hit a couple of days ago. I was sent this by John DeLynn and had the chance to read it over. And then we were talking about it in the news group in terms of covering it. The title of the article is "Americans Haven't Found a Satisfying Alternative to Religion. Is it any wonder the country is revisiting faith?" Again, in the New York Times. And I'll note that the article starts off with Lauren telling her personal story, how she stepped away from Mormonism, as many people have. She talks about the nuns. And she then reports, and the data all substantiates this. This is what we'll go into tonight. The data supports that there was this large drop-off over the last decade or two from religion. Some 40 million Americans stepped away from religion in numbers compared to what percentage of Americans, what number of Americans were involved actively in their religion a couple of decades ago. And we've hit this moment where that has plateaued. And people are beginning to now go back to church. Those numbers are actually going back up. And so here are the main points from the article. First, mass religious exit, but something's missing. Over 40 million Americans have left organized religion in the last few decades. But for many secular replacements, wellness trends, book clubs, meditation apps, they're not quite filling the spiritual void. People aren't being met by these other ways to connect like they felt or experienced in religion. Secularization may have peaked. According to new Pew data, the trend of secularization in the U.S. has slowed. People aren't abandoning religion at the same rate. And there's renewed curiosity, even among young adults, for something spiritual, or I'll say religious. Third, spirituality without religion isn't cutting it. Despite the rise in spiritual but not religious, people report lower well-being, more loneliness, less awe and gratitude compared to those who are religiously affiliated. The DIY, in other words, you've left religion, go pick your own spirituality. The DIY belief system isn't scratching the existential itch. Fourth, religion offers the 3 B's. Sociologists point to belief, belonging, and behavior as the pillars religion provides, offering meaning and community and moral frameworks. Secular culture hasn't matched this trifecta. Fifth, pandemic sparked spiritual reawakening. COVID, for as many people as were in religion, and COVID gave them a moment to step away. I think a lot of Latter-day Saints experienced that, where they stepped away and went like, "Oh, I'm actually pretty well without having to be there." There were other folks who had stepped away prior that having this pause nudged them to enter back into some sort of religious connection. So COVID acted like an existential reset button. Some formerly non-religious Americans turned or returned to faith amid isolation and crisis. Even Harvard chaplains report surging interest in religion. Sixth, the loneliness epidemic. As loneliness surges across the country, again, as we are turn into a world that honors more and more autonomy, shines a light on more and more unhealthiness. One of the negatives that happen from that is that we all sort of do our own thing. And in doing our own thing, we're losing something that humans deeply need, which is social connection. So as loneliness surges across the country, especially among the unaffiliated, many are realizing that they lost what they lost when they walked away from faith, multi-generational, place-based, inconvenient, but rich community. And I think all three of us can speak to that there was something special about Mormonism when you showed up every Sunday and this large group of people were excited to see you and you were excited to see them, and you as a community got to gather together each week to do the work of the church. So the last four here. So number 7, even the elite are reconsidering faith. From Harvard to Silicon Valley to downtown art scenes, formerly secular circles are seeing a resurgence of religious curiosity. Sometimes ironically, sometimes earnestly. Even Grimes, one of the people in the article, said, quote, "I think killing God was a mistake," unquote. Secular substitutes fall short. Number 8.
The
From
good news
Sunday-
is he'll come back to life.
Say that again.
The good news is he'll come back to life.
If you give him a chance, somebody will bring him back in. They'll resurrect him anytime because he's a good moneymaker.
He is risen.
He is indeed.
There, I said it.
Indeed.
By the way, back to that for just a moment, Rebecca. I picture the Methodists going, let's try one of the Mormon traditions. Let's try a Mormon ritual. Everybody grab their handkerchief, and the Methodists would go, that's weird. All right. I'll just note that. Okay. Number 8, from secular substitutes fall short. From Sunday Assembly's atheist church singing Miley Cyrus to CrossFit as church analogies, these alternatives lack staying power. And we've all experienced this ourselves with folks coming out of Mormonism. There are these groups such as Oasis, which I think still has a congregation in Salt Lake City. They've tried it in other places, and it has mixed results and probably more apathy or non-interest than it being thriving. So Oasis is this meeting that folks get together who have left religion, and it still gives you a kind of a churchy sort of environment, but without all the negative things that religion does, without all the rules. It'll teach a lesson from something Brene Brown said or something from a good book that someone read, and more of secular wisdom. And people generally go for a little bit and they don't show up. And so from Sunday Assembly's atheist church singing to the CrossFit, people interviewed say none of it gave them what spiritual community once did. Number 9, data backs religion's health boost. Religious Americans are healthier. We've heard this just recently in the newscast. In terms of some of the data says that those people who go to church are happier or have more beneficial feelings about their life because they're attending church. So religious Americans are healthier, live longer, report higher happiness, gratitude, and spiritual peace than non-religious Americans, sometimes by double-digit margins. Church might not save your soul, but it might save your heart, was the gist of the article. And then lastly, it said many want religion's gifts, but not its baggage. Ex-believers, including the Latter-day Saint author of the article, express a deep longing for what religion gave them, ritual, awe, meaning, but can't reconcile that longing with doctrines they now reject. I want what I had then without compromising who I am now. And so I'll stop there for just a second. I have one more thing I want to read, but I want to stop there for a moment and give the two of you a moment to say anything you want to say about those 10 things that are fleshed out in the article.
I think I think your brain wants comfort, it wants familiarity, and it wants what you know and what's easy for you. And it reminds me of a documentary I watched on Heaven's Gate, where there was a member who left and he lived outside for a year with his girlfriend, and she kind of documented some of it. And then there was a point where he just said, I miss it. I need it. The community, the structure. I'm going back. And it was actually very tragic. She filmed him on the last night as he was packing up. He was going to return to the cult house. And of course, he was one of the ones that ended up losing his life. So they're just, and that's maybe an extreme example, but it is hard to be apart and away from something that you've known your entire life. And your brain is constantly telling you, go back to what you know, instead of forging this new path. So I would be very curious to see the data 5 years from now. All the people that are returning, all the people that are going back to what they've missed for whatever reason, stress or the world as it is today, looking for something that's familiar. I'd like to see if they remain, because anecdotally, a lot of people do return. They think they can, but then they just can't. So I don't know. I'll be curiously watching the data, I think.
Anything from
Yes. So the question then, of course, becomes whether this is something that can be done, can be dissected, can be extricated from the mess, the good stuff and not the bad. I'm going to suggest that you can't. I'm going to suggest that if you could, it would have worked. It would have happened by now. And I'm going to suggest that the baggage and the inspiration, the good stuff and the bad stuff are two sides of the same coin. And like love and marriage, they go together like a horse and carriage, right? You can't have one without the other. It's sort of like the old Pippin, the musical Pippin, where he finally grows up and it's at the end and he's starting to realize that even though he had dreamed in his youth of being an eagle right? That now that he's older and he's had some more experience, this is what he says. I won't sing it, okay. I'm not a giant bird that soars to the sea. And if I'm never tied to anything, then I'll never be free. It's the analogy of the kite, which cannot fly unless it is held by a string.
I'll just note one person here says doctored numbers, and I'll just disagree. I definitely am not in favor of unhealthy religion, and I think there are ways that people can find some of the benefits that religion gave. But I'm with you, RFM. Britt Hartley and I talked about this at length on the Almost Awakened podcast numerous times, that religion is this ancient thing. Now, yes, you might say Christianity's this old and Islam's that old, and some of the newer age stuff is much younger, but religion as a general tool that human beings have utilized to connect human beings into a tribe, to pass on certain technologies, to help them understand the seasons of the year, and I'll get to that in just a moment, to help them understand what the tribe's expectations are, what the rules are, what it means to be a good. Those things are thousands of years old, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands. And they serve a purpose in a community. Now, that's a side issue from whether people, human beings, unhealthy human beings, have always utilized religion. Those in authority, the people who work themselves to the top of many of these systems, have a desire to capitalize on power, wealth, sex, and influence, and they're causing harm. So I want to know, the person here who said doctored numbers, that's just not true. The numbers so far, and again, as you point out, Rebecca, there's more data to come. Some of this is early, but the data that's coming in substantiates that these are true things about what you lose when you step away from religion, and why we may have hit a plateau of the nuns leaving, and why we might be on the front end of a movement for people to start going back. Now, the author leaves open this idea that maybe we've come all the way this way, we've learned this really big lesson, and now we're going to move all the way back the other direction. And I don't think that's true. I think we'll see a small uptick, but I think we are in the modern age of information. People are, if they're open at all, they're forced to sense into whether their system is healthy or not. And systems change too, so they might adapt and make it easier for people to stay. Mormonism is certainly in the midst of that. But also, I don't think we're going to, as the world is constituted currently, I don't think people are going to come in some strong wave and move back towards religion either. Instead, we're going to have to wrestle with the effects of religion. You're okay, I'll get to you in a second. We're going to have to get to the effects of religion and start doing a better job of sorting out what are the benefits that religion gives and why, and how can we best approximate those. As you point out, RFM, we might not be able to do so exactly, but best approximate those in a way that's healthy for people. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is that those very things which you define as unhealthy in religion are probably the main attractions.
Yeah, people love certainty. They love to be in the inside group. They love to be the winning team. They want answers to where they're going and why they're here. And there, it might have been Randy here this weekend, but I was saying that, we in this space of content creation are often giving people resources that can lead to them waking up to realizing how unhealthy their system is and making new choices with that information. But I also argue that people subconsciously are agreeing to the trade-off that they're getting. Whatever negative is coming towards them, they also justify it in their own subconscious minds for why they keep going. Hence, there's an agreement in place. And when any person attending church decides not to keep that agreement anymore, that the harm is too great and they no longer want to be there, they'll make different choices. So here's what I wrote as a conclusion to that, and then I'll move on from my story. It makes sense that religion served a powerful role for thousands of years. It wasn't just about belief, it was the technology of a community. It passed down the rules, the stories, the expectations. It pointed us to the phases of the moon. It drew our attention to the changes of our weather and our seasons. It even taught us our agricultural practices to some degree. It bound people together in ways that made them more than just individuals sharing geography. It created tribes, cohesive, loyal, and willing to sacrifice for each other when the stakes were high. That kind of unity, that's not nothing. But here's where we often get it wrong. We go binary. We say religion is bad, religion is the only way, and that's just lazy thinking. Of course, something that endured this many centuries offered real value. So if we abandon religion entirely, we should expect that there will be a cost, especially when it comes to meaning, belonging, and those hardwired rituals that made life feel enchanted, especially when we have collectively spent so little time to understand the babies that are in the bathwater. But let's be honest, people aren't walking away because they hate connection. They're walking away because they're done with toxic leadership. The narcissistic prophets and bishops, the pastors and priests who feed off control, who hide their abuse and the abuse of others, who weaponize shame and turn spiritual curiosity into conformity test. People aren't rejecting belief. They're rejecting the cruelty, the boxes, and the gaslighting. And so I'll just note, Britt and I had several episodes of this on the Almost Awakened podcast. There needs to be a lot of work done that will help people to start figuring out the things that religion does. And as you point out, RFM, it may be impossible. So I end here with, so maybe the question isn't, do we need religion? Maybe it's, can we keep the beneficial, useful aspects of religion, the beauty, the community, the wonder, the tribe binding technology that creates loving, caring communities without the authoritarian rot? That's the tension. And it's where a lot of folks are stuck. We want what we had then, but not at the cost of who we are now. And I think it's okay to sit in that discomfort. In fact, it might be the most honest place to start. So while religionists will say that we learned religion is better and we are going back, that simply isn't the truth. But those of us on this side saying it's useless and no one needs the benefits it brings, well, you aren't right either. The question is, who are the people who will do the hard work and sense into all the value that religion brings to a community and find a way to create something that connects with that in such a way that we collectively are all attracted to it and give our lives within it while not being damaged by it. And while that work has begun with ideas like Oasis and humanist churches and the Universalist Church, the real pioneers who will create something that is healthy and holds our attention and doesn't harm us, well, there is much work to be done. That's probably in front of us somewhere in the future. And I'll just leave it there and get any last thoughts on the story from either of you. And otherwise, we can move on to the next story.
Yeah, when I first read this article, I thought this is really interesting. And I think we'll be talking about it for a long time in different ways. I feel that the shared myth is a double-edged sword. And it is very difficult when you talk about community and trying to find community and organizations. This last weekend was the National Atheist Convention back east, and I have a friend that's there. You know, they're definitely trying to find something, but it reminds me, one of the major players in that organization is Dr. Darrell Ray, who wrote The God Virus. I don't know if you guys have ever read that, but he talks about vectors of indoctrination, you know, and the most powerful one is being indoctrinated as a child. And it's so powerful that even if you step away for decades, you can come to a point in your life where you feel there's something missing, or you have a tragedy or a change or an event, and your mind literally will return to that vector, that religion that you were indoctrinated with as a child, and you will crave or long to return to that just to find that comfort and peace. And I just wonder how many of these people returning, you know, with so many things going on in the world and people's lives, maybe that's part of it, you know, that you're just seeking that out and you can't, it's very hard to override, you know, that the vector that indoctrinated you, and that would be your, you know, your childhood church or your family. A lot of people return, whether we want to hear that or not. I mean, think about the Comeback podcast, right? That exists for people that have left the church and they each have a story and they come back. So I think we'll be studying this for a while, but great story, great information.
You know, you said vector 3 times.
I had to, because that's the important
part.
What's
your vector, Victor?
Yeah, Victor. You have to read The God Virus. It's an extremely interesting book, Dr. Darrell Ray.
But by the way, in case anybody's out there, you know, thinking this is horrible or something or unexpected. I mean, this is a pendulum swing of faithfulness in a population, especially when it's large and as varied as the United States. And it's been going this way on the pendulum for a while. I mean, was there anybody out there who really thought that it was just going to keep going until nobody went to church anymore in the country or in the world? Now, of course, what goes on in the world around us frequently is what tends to drive whether we are more religious. There was a huge uptick after World War I with a huge slaughter of the young men, the United States soldiers. And so it was everywhere. They lost so many people that the huge rise in spiritualism. In fact, was it Woodrow Wilson's wife who held seances in the White House? And it wasn't considered to be really that remarkable, I think, because everybody was having them. So I think that this is something that's going to go back, and I think it'll go back past the middle part. I don't know how far, but this is a pendulum which swings along with all the other pendulums about what we're doing and what we're not doing as a population.
And as people, as things are happening in your environment, I mean, we have a moment in time right now where a lot of us are feeling stress. We're feeling some sort of existential fear. Those collective moments drive people to look for comforting things as well. And so, yeah, as you point out, RFM, people will move in all kinds of directions over the coming decades. And we're in one of those moments where we're moving back the other way.
Right. In a lot of ways, religion is a complicated subject. I don't mean to reduce it to one thing, but control is an important aspect of religion, that it gives the at least illusion of control to its adherents, that they can control things that otherwise are out of their control. So sometimes when society seems to be careening and out of control, religion may go up.
Yeah. Excellent points. It kind of reminds me, whenever I think of going back, I think of Seinfeld and the episode where George decided to get back together with his girlfriend, Susan. And there's a moment where he's walking up the steps to her apartment and he's just looking around. He thought he could do it. And then he's just like, nope, he just can't. So that's kind of how I picture it. Of course, I love Seinfeld. So, all right. Thank you, Bill. That was an excellent treatment of that article. And I think next we have, of course, some temple news, right? If we can bring the slide up.
Who's covering that?
Yeah, who would be covering that? It's funny you should bring that up because over the weekend I won some kind of award from Porch Time. I was not really too familiar with that show, but
I was watching it. I was really happy.
You sent me the clip, but the award
got
is
the Autist of the Week award. I didn't know there was such an award.
Well, yeah, and I don't really know what it is, but the gist of it was, here's an award for this lady that just can't shut up about temples and building things. So there you go. Thank you. I'd like to accept.
I made a clip of it and sent it to you because I thought you'd want to know.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me, again, I'm just being all pop culture of The Office, where, they say to poor Andy, shut up about the sun, right? I'm sure people want to say, shut up about temples, but I can't and I won't. And I'm going to tell you why as we get through here. So Fairview United, we've been talking about this and we're going to have the live stream coming up in a couple days. Fairview United, the residents group that has been organized, they wear those green shirts. They sent out a newsletter this week to let the residents know what was happening. They have their own schematic here of the proposed temple. The red lines there indicate where the city codes are. And so they're still making the point, look, it's still beyond, what our town allows. So they wanted to get that out there. And you can look at that with some of the numbers. It is still beyond what the church is requesting. So, but the main thing I think they're going to focus on, and I think this is one of the most important things, is the lighting. I mean, honestly, haven't you ever just thought if they would not light them up, they would be so much less intrusive if they just would not do that. So some of the information that Fairview United is putting out to the residents as they prepare to attend this planning and zoning meeting is about the lighting. And it says the proposed lighting plan submitted uses a technique called wall washing. Have you guys heard of that before? This is what they do. This technique projects light from a ground fixture onto the white stone facade, which reflects the light outward, giving the appearance of a glowing building. And that means that the stone is treated with, certain elements that make it, very reflective. And you can see that here. So the light shines up. It just gives it that kind of otherworldly, I would call eerie, because I live in Utah. I drive past these all the time, this eerie glow. So were you guys familiar with that technique?
No, it's the lusterware, though.
It is lusterware, exactly. So Fairview United says, and lists some codes here. In this code of the Fairview ordinances states that in granting or denying an application for a conditional use permit, zoning district classification, the Planning and Zoning Commission, in its recommendation, and the governing body of the town may take into consideration the following factors. And lighting is a huge one. And they kind of list out things like they're asking them to change the color and texture of the exterior stone to reduce light reflection. Instead, the church is doing the opposite, right? It wants to increase light reflection. Limit all exterior lighting to a color temperature not to exceed 3,000 Kelvin. Now, it's very technical, but they're asking lights dim by 50% at 9 o'clock, turn them off completely by 10:30 p.m., stipulations on parking lot lights. I think when we all tune into the live stream, this is what you're going to be hearing a lot about, is the lighting, as the planning and zoning tries to hammer this out. If the height is kind of what it is and nothing happens with that, the lighting is where they need to focus, because that is really going to impact the residents. So, look at that glowing building. I don't know. I just find it looks just a little creepy. Then they also let everybody know to wear their green shirts to the meeting, right? And of course, the LDS church has been told via emails from the stake president, we talked about this last newscast, to wear their blue shirts, right? So it's going to be blue and green there. It gives the dates of the meetings. And again, we'll put out more about that. But Thursday, the 24th, a few days from now, is the first one. That's planning and zoning, right? The application has to go to planning and zoning first to hammer out all those details. They will make a recommendation to the town council. Now, if they say we don't recommend this in its present state, needs some more revisions, that means the town council would need a super majority to pass it. So all of these meetings are going to be down to the wire. It's going to be really interesting to watch.
So, Rebecca,
yes,
with 7 people on the city council, is a super majority 5?
6, I think.
Is it 6?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not completely clear. Maybe somebody is watching from Fairview. They tend to do it and can let me know. But I'll find that out for sure, and we'll talk about that in the pre-show on Thursday night. But here's the note I thought was interesting. So this was in the newsletter, again, sent out to Fairview residents. It says, important note, the LDS Church emailed thousands of their members asking them to attend both meetings and wear blue shirts. Like last summer, we expect hundreds of LDS members to flood our local meetings. Intentional or not, these actions prevent Fairview residents themselves from accessing seats in the Fairview Town Council. Again, this is a much smaller venue than they rented out last year for the crowd. And they had a really hard time getting seats for the Fairview residents themselves, even in that larger venue. They had trouble accessing seats in the Fairview Town Council chambers and effectively disenfranchised Fairview citizens from their local government processes. Anyone hoping to speak at the meeting should plan to arrive at the town hall early in the day to prevent disenfranchisement. So it reminds me kind of of the Whistling Whittlers, right? This is a group back in the day, Joseph Smith era, where they wouldn't necessarily do anything. The church painted a picture of small boys with cute little pocket pen knives, whistling and following people around that they wanted to kind of send a message to, like, you're not welcome in town. Well, they were grown men, with big knives. It wasn't as innocuous as they point out. But the point is just the presence, this overwhelming presence of all these members from all over in the Temple District at that meeting. It's going to be something. And we're really hoping that the people from Fairview, and that means LDS members and people from Fairview United, or just anyone that's interesting who actually resides in the town, will be allowed to comment, because those are the people we need to hear from. It's going to be built in their town. So one last slide here. What we'll find out from the planning and zoning, there are 3 possible things that can happen at that meeting. The first thing that can happen is they can just approve the conditional use permit without any changes. They say, this is great. I'm going to recommend that the town council vote full steam ahead. Let's do it. Okay, that could happen. Another thing that could happen is they could approve the conditional use permit, known as a CUP, with conditions, meaning we'll let you build here, but we still got to hammer out the height, the lighting, the traffic. It could be anything, all these different things. Back to the drawing board for those. Come back with something else and we'll keep talking. So approved, but with conditions. Now, the third thing that could happen is a complete rejection of the conditional use permit and of the church's application. And in that case, the town council would need, as I mentioned, a super majority. So this is what we're looking at. This is why we're going to live stream it. It's going to be extremely interesting to hear the comments from the members and from Fairview United. And I think it's going to be pretty fascinating. Any quick comments on that before I go to another temple?
No, I don't.
Nope.
I'll just say that regardless of where this ends up, I'm glad to see that this is heading to some sort of finality.
Yep.
And that the town of Fairview can get a resolution one way or another and can move on. And because this has occupied so much of their energy.
Yes, it has. However, what would I possibly podcast about once this is done? Well, I'll show you in the next slide. No.
I predict that after a great deal of controversy at the hearings, that this will sail through on the votes.
Yeah, and you've actually been right and predicted every single thing that has happened all along, because I think you have more of a legal mind than the rest of us that might be a little more emotional about it, right?
That's with the 30-foot, right? The 30-foot high lighting maximum that you had mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to hammer out the lighting. We don't know about what the lighting is.
I don't think they're going to be allowed to light the thing up from.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, we saw in Vegas that they had passed ordinances where they can't. We talked about that last time. So, all over the place, they're trying to say, look, let's just make this fit into the community. So something else was on my radar, which this just makes me smile. I said, ladies and gentlemen, Flagstaff, Arizona has entered the chat. Now, we talked about the temple in Flagstaff being announced just conference like a few weeks ago. And all of a sudden, here it appears on the Flagstaff community Reddit thread, right? And it says, oppose new Mormon temple. Of course, that caught my eye. This person says, I recently heard about the new proposed temple and I'm not pleased. I grew up in Gilbert, so I'm all too familiar with the gaudy monstrosities they have in the valley. I ended up making a flyer to try and get the word out to more locals. Now we're talking, this was just announced, right? We are years away from any kind of, application or anything. This person already knows that they need to get the word out. Please share this if you can. I'll be printing some of them and handing them out at the protest this weekend to get some more eyes. The QR code is a link tree with information, how to attend a city council meeting, how to write to our city council members. Additionally, thanks to the original poster on here, I found a great podcast from Rebecca Biblioteca from Mormonish, which I also linked. And
yay.
It's really interesting. And then there is this comprehensive flyer where we probably don't need to go through it. You guys can pause on it, but it just mentions all the things. Let's work out the lighting. Let's talk about the height. Let's make sure that we contact our city council members. Let's pay attention to our zoning. Let's do some due diligence years in advance to see what's happening. Because, there is one part I'll read. I'm going to read on here. It says, Flagstaff is the world's first international dark sky city. I mean, this is what they're mostly concerned about, are the dark skies. LDS temples typically feature bright uplighting and illuminated spires. We know that. These features conflict with the city codes, light pollution. The bright temple would impede both the Lowell and the naval observatories. They have very important observatory. I talked about how Pluto was discovered there. But I think the bottom line here is that when Mormonish started podcasting about the Cody Temple, and then the Heber Temple got involved, and then all of a sudden we're contacted by Fairview, and we're contacted by Las Vegas. Our goal was never to, like this person says, oppose the new Mormon temple. That's really not our goal. The goal was just to let towns have autonomy in how they enforce their ordinances, to be able to work with an entity coming in like a temple and come out with an outcome that's great for everybody. So the LDS members have their temple, the town is happy that it's there, and there's goodwill all around. And this is why we continue to talk about it on the newscast. This is why Nemo got on board. And to see that a temple is announced, and within a week or so, somebody has probably done some Google searches and has come across all of our content to sort of let them know, okay, these are the things I need to be aware of. This is what I need to look out. This is how I can kind of mobilize to help do what's best for my community. That just kind of warms my, people have accused me of having a cold, dead heart, right? As I podcast about these things, but I just think it's great. And everybody's a part of that. So I thought that was good.
Who has accused you of having a cold, dead heart?
You have the haters. People say all kinds of things. Don't they say things to you?
Everybody loves me. How about you, Bill?
You're probably right.
It's a funny thing because these temples are built to be gaudy. They are built to be big. They're built to be bright. and they're built to attract attention.
Yep.
And it's just like, it's so obvious, right? They're their own billboard in the entire valley, a huge valley. They want this to be the thing that everyone's eye is drawn to know that that is the Mormon temple that you're looking at, mister.
Yeah.
And here are the codes, which of course are saying, okay, not so gaudy, not so big, not so bright. And that's what the fight is about, really, because the Mormons want their temples to be garish.
Yep, that's it. And again, we know that those ordinances can take place inside a building that is not lit up and that is much shorter, and everyone can be happy because it's all about the ordinances. We've been told that by many of our leaders. I had to laugh on social media. Somebody said, temples are like somebody that doesn't have any real taste. And then they think, oh, this is fancy. This is going to look fancy. We're going to build this. And that's exactly what you're describing, sort of a gaudy, kind of a garish kind of a thing. So
if I were in charge of the church, which I'm not,
here we go.
I would have this be totally in conformity with the dark skies and include an observatory as part of the temple.
Can you imagine if the celestial room roof parted and you saw that incredible? I mean, that's God right there.
And I'm just spitballing this. It has to be something that you can access without going through the temple, but you make it so good. They got so much money. Make it better than these other observatories so that people will want to come to the temple, outside the temple, and go into that observatory to look up into the heavens.
No, I mean, there's a reason a lot of people, post-Mormons, nuance Mormons, they all seem to kind of discover nature, and they seem to discover the sky and how small and inconsequential it makes you feel. They kind of find their deity or their higher power that way. So it is interesting that temple lighting kind of takes care of that. There are no stars when you're living right next to a temple. So, all right, this came on my radar literally just a few hours ago. I thought this was very interesting. Another temple, Latter-day Saints file $7.5 million permit for Jacksonville temple, marking major development step. So that's interesting. And it made me think WWJD. I think that stands for what would Jesus develop? I'm not
this
kidding.
Isn't a real picture.
Well, no, that's Jesus in a hard hat.
There are guys who look like Jesus who do construction work.
Yeah. What would Jesus develop? Because it seems like anymore, temples do not exist without a development around them. And we saw that very clearly with the temple that was proposed in Urda, Utah, where when the town said, sure, build the temple, we love it, but we cannot support the infrastructure of your development. Temple, yes, we'll pass that right through, but we can't have your housing development. And of course, we know what the church did. They said, nope, we got to go somewhere where we have high-end luxury houses with our temple. Because WWJD. So it's kind of interesting. So just a little bit about this. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is preparing to break ground on its first temple in Jacksonville, filing a $7.5 million permit with the city April 18th for the site clearing work. Gives the address there. The permit marks the first major step toward development of the 6.6-acre property, with the site plan showing the project will unfold in two phases. The first phase, of course, includes construction of a 29,000 square foot temple. Right? That's how it should be. This is temple building on a 0.58-acre site and the associated infrastructure, while the second phase calls for the construction of what? A 20-lot subdivision. Of course, Jesus has got to have his subdivisions. It's not enough that it's the house of the Lord. We have to have houses around the house of the Lord.
These are the cabanas of the Lord.
I think so. So it says the site plans were approved April 16th with the church listed as the developer. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm kind of talking to a real estate lawyer to find out how does this work exactly? The church is a developer, but then there are all kinds of other companies. I mean, I can't comprehend it. If somebody in the chat can, how a non-profit religion purchases land and then develops it for profit, I don't know. It probably involves
part of the temple complex.
Exactly. It's too much. It involves 13 shell companies. Anyway, they talk about the engineering firm, the contractor, and then it says the church acquired the land in 2024 for $7.2 million. And now, of course, they're going to build this whole situation here. So just interesting. Take note, I think. I think we'll see it a lot more going forward. Temples are announced. It used to be they would build within an existing, like a plan subdivision kind of thing. Now it's like that comes hand in glove with the temple. It's kind of interesting.
I think there's a story behind the last sentence, which you probably omitted because it sounds so boring.
Yes, it does sound very boring.
Both of the companies
Yeah.
are associated with the same guy
Oh, yes.
who is president of South Belt Group Corp?
Yes. Yeah, I know. We can dig into any of these names of the companies, and I think we'll find the real story. So, like I said,
Okay.
this was just breaking. So
I'm not
I'm sure
saying there's
there'll be more.
anything illegal. I just think there's some kind of story behind it. It may
I'm
not
sure
be an
there is.
interesting story.
I'm sure there's a kind of story. And then just kind of to wrap up, I wanted to, commend again Bill from last week for breaking that news the day before it even came out, where there were some announcements, of course, in conference about temples in Australia. And an article came out right away about the Mormon Church, not so positive, right? We went through the article a little bit, but I kind of listed out the things that it mentioned that were not so great. Let me see if I can see my notes here. Hold on. Yeah. They mentioned, although the article, says there are 160,000 practicing Mormons, the census, which is accurate, you self-report, only 57,000. This article in an Australian paper mentions the temple can be toured for a little while and then it's completely closed. So secrecy they're talking about the baptisms can be controversial. They mention, the Holocaust victims being baptized. They talk about abusing the tax laws in Australia, hundreds of millions of dollars, controversies related to LGBTQ community, the church's hand reaching into Australian government and global politics. And then they also mentioned child sexual abuse. So boy, this article, the church makes an announcement about a temple and they lay it out there for the people in Australia. This is what this church is. Boom, boom, boom. So, and I think we mentioned last week, I think the church is used to getting really positive PR for once when they announce an open house, when they announce a new temple. And I thought from the article last week that Bill showed, I wonder if that's really true anymore. And then very interestingly, that very same day, I came across an article about the Nairobi temple, and it has an open house that actually just started last week. The same thing happened. Not so great PR. Now, this article is written from an evangelical reporter in, I think it was some kind of a Christian magazine. But again, they are just laying it out there. These are not positive. And I'm not going to read everything here, but just know that this article goes through kind of like the Australian article, things that evangelicals and other Christians may need to be aware of, talking about their growth is not what they claim, and their, ordinances are not what they claim, and a counterfeit Christianity they're talking about. So they really do lay it out. It is not a positive article, and it's supposed to be a 2-part article. So here the church announces this open house, and right away, we're getting into this sort of negative PR. So the part that I really wanted to get to, their final statement is Mormonism is not merely another Christian denomination. It is a theological system that distorts the gospel. This would be Christian or evangelical gospel, and leads people away from the biblical truth. As the LDS Church intensifies its outreach in East Africa, believers will remain watchful, discerning, and equipped to uphold the faith once delivered to the saints. So it's kind of a warning, that perhaps the LDS Church is not as it appears. Now, I thought I would kind of look into, we hear about this tremendous growth in Africa, and there is growth for the LDS Church in Africa, and that's definitely inflating and pumping up the numbers. But, what's happening with other Christian churches in Africa? That's not so widely known. So I grabbed some stats here. And it says, as of 2024, there are an estimated 734 million Christians from all the different denominations in Africa. And that's up from 10 million in 1900. So it's taken a century, a little more, but 734 Christians in Africa. That's incredible. So how does this break down? The article said that the LDS Church is approaching 1 million, and that can be true. These stats are from 2024. It says in 2024, the LDS Church had an estimated 600,000 members. Now that sounds pretty big to us, probably sounds really big to faithful members, the way they talk about this, and they talk about the wards and the stakes, and you're always seeing this growth. But again, let's talk about the other Christian denominations. An estimated 200 million evangelicals are in Africa. An estimated 60 million angelic, how do you say that? Anglicans. I know. I was like, pelicans? No, sorry, Anglicans. I can't even read my own writing. 23 million Lutherans in Africa, 29 million Baptists in Africa, and Methodists, 25 million, Presbyterians, 20 million, 12 million Adventists. Now that's interesting because that's a church that started at the same time as the LDS Church, Vernover District, the Seventh-day Adventists, and 19 million belong to United Churches. So when we read that first number, let's be generous and say 1 million or approaching 1 million. That's kind of an interesting disparity there. What do you guys think? Have you ever thought about that? Christianity in Africa? What do you guys think?
No, I hadn't. What about you, Bill?
That's a lot of religion in a place that none of those religions initiated. And especially with like the LDS Church being a leadership of old white guys, and then preaching to a population that is full of people of color and various groups and ethnicities. It's such a strange thing to see. Again, I know the numbers for Mormonism are so much lower than these other faiths, but it's so strange to see a people on the other side of the planet taking American Christianity in the way they do. It's just, again, it's interesting to watch as it unfolds.
It is interesting to watch. And depending on the kind of articles that come out, the kind of PR, the kind of information about, not just Mormonism, but all Christianity, is this something that, it's going to take? Is there going to be, like you said, a decline? Right now, it's absolutely booming. And I thought it was interesting when they announced all the new area reps, and a lot of them in Africa, absolutely growing, stakes, wards, everything. And I kind of read through the occupations, and it seemed like a lot of them actually worked for the church. So it seems like the church is trying to, build stable communities. They're trying to promote kind of upward mobility, especially through education. So cynical me says, is it really all about religion, or is it some of these other benefits from this community? This goes back to what Bill was talking about, that they are enjoying. I just had to crunch one more set of numbers because I was so curious. There are 29 Latter-day Saint temples operating or under construction or announced in Africa. I was not aware that that was the number. 29 as of the last conference, and located all over the place, different places here. So I kind of crunched the numbers based on a million. If there are a million LDS members, and that means, it's 0.0013% of the population, and that's 1 out of every 100,000 people. And that means if everybody were active, 1 temple for every 34,000 members. But if you go by what we know are more accurate stats, a fourth of those, maybe 1 temple for every 8,620 people. So anyway, it'll be very interesting to watch this. But I was fascinated as I was researching this, just Christianity and different areas of the world where it's booming. It'll be interesting to watch. So, all right. I think
I actually kind of like that temple.
Yeah, no, exactly. Do you know what? Some of the temples that they seem to be more, I don't know, they have more of a charm. They're kind of crafted to really fit into the look and feel of where they are. Yeah, I don't know why they can't do that in the United States. I don't know. So, all right, enough about me and shut up about the temple, right? Enough about that. Let's go to, I think RFM is next. And
you could win the award 2 weeks in a row if you tried hard.
I just can't stop talking about it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But we'll hear from RFM now, who's going to tell us about tithing. We've been following this for quite a while too.
Right. Now, here's the thing. The judge dismissed the lawsuit against the LDS Church over how it uses donations. This is the lawsuit where 9 plaintiffs had gotten assembled and stuck together in the lawsuit in downtown Salt Lake City at the federal courthouse. And the amazing thing is, by the way, that this huge lawsuit actually, it doesn't completely, but it turns on the fact that the judge found that they filed it too late after the 3-year statute of limitations had run. So I am going to guess here, okay? I know what the judge said. The judge said the statute of limitations began to run when David Nielsen, that whistleblower complaint was made public. He didn't make it public, but it was made public. And that was, I believe, at the end of 2019, December. So it talks about it in the articles. So as of that time, if you're going to bring a fraud lawsuit, you are on notice that there's something wrong and a basis to bring a lawsuit. Okay. So 3 years begins from December of 2019, expires December of 2022. All of these were filed after that date. Therefore, they were gone. Now, I will tell you that the other side was probably arguing, no, it doesn't start in December of 2019. It starts when the SEC order was published, right? In other words, it's not just a whistleblower, somebody saying this, right? There's somebody claiming it. It's not necessarily, it's not proven. Okay. So what the judge said, Judge Shelby said, is that's what started it. And the other side, I'm sure, was saying, I didn't find it specifically mentioned. That's why I keep saying that. Was saying, no, it's when the SEC order came out in February of 2023. And I can see that argument easier than I can see the other one. So why is it that just some whistleblower, why is that what should put you on notice of fraud enough to file a lawsuit to begin a statute of limitations running? Anyway, we'll go over this. Okay. Let me see. This one I can't move, Bill. Oh, there's just this little clip. That's from a news report, I think. Covers the bases. We'll get some audio visual in here and mix it up, so the audience doesn't go to the restroom in the middle of the show. Right, Rebecca? We wouldn't want that to happen.
Give me just a second.
We're trying really hard, right?
Absolutely.
Everything. Cats, dogs, audio, visual, juggling. Can you juggle RFM?
I sprang this on Bill. That was my fault.
Well, the issue with this one was that it required me to open it in YouTube rather than play it in the slideshow. Here we go.
Today, a federal judge in Salt Lake City tossed out a class action lawsuit against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its investment company, alleging fraud over the religious practice of tithing. Our content partners at the Salt Lake Tribune report plaintiffs sued to recover their tithing, which they believe was misspent. The judge dismissed the lawsuit, saying it was poorly argued and filed too late. Judge Robert Shelby says the plaintiffs should have taken legal notice when an IRS whistleblower called attention to church finances in 2019. At that time, a 3-year statute of limitations was set. The lawsuit dismissed today was filed 10 months after the deadline.
All right. Thank you for playing that. You're shaking your head up there vigorously, Rebecca. It looked like it was about the statute of limitations, starting with the whistleblower. I can't hear you, and I really want to.
Sorry.
What do you want to hear? Oh, her. Sorry.
No, I was muted. I'm shaking my head because
Thank you.
a few of us follow, this whistleblower, and we hear about it behind the scenes, or there might be an article here or there. It certainly would not make anybody at that point. I myself did not go, wow, I wonder if I can get my tithing back. I just don't think you would think that until you had some governmental entities kind of back it up and go, you know what, there is something really wrong here. I think then you might start to think, okay, there might be legs to this. Maybe I can get involved in some kind of a suit. So I just think it's not right to base it on that.
Doesn't something have to happen legally that you would have a moment in time where you draw a line and go, okay, the whistleblower's data has been proven to be problematic for the church?
That's it.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure that he went that far. But this article by Matthew Brown of the Associated Press appeared last Thursday when this ruling was handed down by Judge Robert Shelby. A federal judge on Thursday dismissed a lawsuit alleging that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, ARM, misused hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations by investing it instead of using it for charitable purposes, the ARM being the EPA. U.S. District Judge Robert Shelby said a 3-year statute of limitations on fraud claims in Utah passed before the lawsuit was filed in October 2023. The judge also said the plaintiffs failed to adequately show how any fraud had occurred. So he not only said they missed the deadline, but also that they hadn't properly pleaded their case. In other words, they didn't have proof for every element of the offense. So that's going to be his fallback position. This will obviously be appealed. And we'll see what the circuit court has to say, the appellate court, the circuit court, has to say about when the statute of limitations runs? I think that's a really open question.
Do we know anything about the religious background? Is Shelby a Utah judge? I know it said federal, but is it out of Utah?
Well, he lives in Utah, I'm sure, because that's where he works.
Yeah, that would always raise some questions for me anyway.
The legal action from a group of donors to the church brought renewed scrutiny over how the faith known widely as the Mormon Church handles its vast financial holdings. By the way, this is the good news out of all of this, okay? You do win some, you do lose some, but also the one thing that happens every time there's a newspaper article about this, regardless of whether the church wins, is it brings renewed scrutiny over how the faith, known widely as the Mormon Church, handles its vast financial holdings, and that they are vast indeed. Those holdings are bolstered by so-called tithing from church members who contribute 10% of their income. For some reason, oh, hang on, I can do it. I can advance it down below. That's what I'll do. Thank you. The lawsuit was directed at business and investment entities under the church, which doesn't publicly disclose details about its finances. Wow. The church does not publicly disclose details about its finances. I want to emphasize that. That's why, okay? It's a big question because they refuse to let people know what they have and how they're spending it, except for those things that they want to do press releases on, which put them in a good light, of course. Attorneys for the plaintiffs wanted an independent entity to oversee donated funds. They also sought class action certification that could have brought millions of church members into the case. Church spokesperson Sam Penrod said tithing donations are an expression of faith that allow it to fulfill its mission. These donations are carefully used and wisely managed under the direction of senior church leader. It's probably supposed to be plural, leaders. Penrod said in an emailed statement, the legal claims brought against the church were rightfully dismissed by the court. That's what the church spokesperson says. Well, you know something? Lawyers find it easier to agree with judges when they rule for them. Plaintiff's attorney, Christopher Seeger, said the dismissal would make it harder for church members to understand how donations are used. Yeah, like impossible to understand. For decades, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have contributed 10% of their hard-earned income as tithes, and they have the right to know how these donations are being used, Seeger said. No, I don't think they have the right to know. At least not yet. A similar lawsuit was filed in federal court in California in 2021 by James Huntsman, brother of former Utah Governor John Huntsman Jr., who was seeking the return of $5 million he donated before he left the church. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in January upheld a lower court ruling that sided with the church. At issue in the lawsuits was whether the church's investment in stocks, bonds, real estate, and agriculture reflect the wishes of its donors. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission fined the church and subsidiary Ensign Peak Advisors $5 million in February 2023 for using shell companies to obscure the size of the investment portfolio under church control. The church agreed to pay $1 million, and Ensign Peak will pay $4 million. And there we have Roger Clark, who was the head of Ensign Peak during the relevant period of time, which was about 20 years, I think he was the manager. This is his quote: "Let it not be forgot, church leaders were concerned that public knowledge of the fund's wealth," Roger Clark said, "might discourage tithing. Paying tithing is more of a sense of commitment than it is the church needing the money. So they never wanted to be in a position where people felt like they shouldn't make a contribution, i.e. shouldn't pay tithing." This was the mens rea. This is why they were engaged in this huge cover-up in order to keep the U.S. government and the membership in the dark about how much money the church had in the U.S. stock market. The church has previously defended how it handles member contributions, calling the fraud claims baseless and saying contributions go to a variety of religious purposes, including missionary work, education, humanitarian causes, and construction of churches, temples, and other buildings important to church work. And that's all done, as we know, out of what is brought in each year, out of the new money. And what's left over from that goes into the pile, into the dragon's hoard, which is the EPA. The church's corporate arm, the Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I think that is actually the church. I'm not sure if the reporter understands this, or maybe I'm the one who misunderstands it, but it's like they're trying to make a distinction between the church and the corporation of the president of the church. However, it solicits donations for humanitarian relief with promises that all donations are used to help those in need. So if you make the contribution for the humanitarian aid fund, then they say it will be used in a certain way to help people, as opposed to tithing, right? But the Utah lawsuit argued that the church hid information that some, if not all, donations are permanently invested in accounts never used for charitable work. That includes tithes, regular donations amounting to 10% of a person's income that are expected from church members. The money instead has gone to Ensign Peak Advisors, a nonprofit created in 1997 that has grown to over $100 billion in value, the lawsuit alleged. Yes, it's about double that at this point. It's around $200 billion. But we know that only because of the work of the people at the Widow's Mite Report. You want to find out the best research on the church's finances, which they try and keep secret and hidden from the members and everyone else. Go to the Widow's Mite Report and check out what they have there. That's how we know it's definitely over $100 billion. There's David Nielsen. Like the lawsuit filed by Huntsman, the case leaned on allegations by whistleblower David Nielsen, a former Ensign Peak investment manager who submitted a 90-page memorandum to the U.S. Senate Finance Committee demanding oversight into the church's finances. Details on his allegations were publicized by the Associated Press and other media organizations in late 2019. You know where this is going now, don't you? In early 2020, according to Thursday's ruling. Shelby, that's the judge, said the plaintiffs in the Utah case should have been aware of the fraud allegations by early 2020, yet did not file their case for more than 3 years, too late for the statute of limitations. It strains credulity that reasonably diligent individuals who had donated substantial sums of money to the church and were otherwise interested in church affairs would not have learned of matters described in the whistleblower report at or near the time of its release, Shelby wrote. That's Denver. While the two dismissed cases did not touch the church autonomy doctrine, which LDS attorneys said precludes such lawsuits, a third case may get there. 2023, in other words, these cases have been being dismissed on other grounds other than actually getting to whether this invades the church autonomy doctrine or whether it's outside of it and therefore justiciable by a court in the United States. A 2023 class action filed by Laura Gaddy and 2 other ex-Mormons alleges church leaders intentionally misrepresented its founding to induce the faith of its members and thus deceptively gain contributions. Though Shelby dismissed the Gaddy lawsuit, she appealed to the 10th Circuit in Denver, where a 3-judge panel heard oral arguments in September 2024. Is that 7 months ago? No decision has yet been handed down in that case, but it could be happening any day. Ensign Peak has spent funds only twice in its 26-year history, according to both lawsuits. In 2000, and apparently, to my knowledge, okay, I haven't read everything related to all these cases, okay. To the best of my understanding, the church has never denied this. In 2009, it spent $600 million to bail out a failing church-owned for-profit life insurance company. Beginning in 2010, it put $1.4 billion to build a mall near Temple Square in downtown Salt Lake City. So there's another one. We have a ruling. It will be appealed. regardless of what this ruling had been, I'm sure it would have been appealed. But this puts the onus now on the plaintiffs to file that notice of appeal within 30 days and pursue it. Back to you, Rebecca.
I was just going to say, I know all of us have podcasted about all of these tithing lawsuits. You know, it seems like it's been going on forever, but I think about what my co-host on Mormonish Landon always says. He's like, you know, if a person donated under these circumstances to an organization that was, you know, a corporation, they would have all kinds of legal protections as far as they lied to me about where my money went. You know, they didn't tell me the truth. They misled me. There's all kinds of protections in place for corporate fraud. But it's almost like whoever the powers that be feel that if you're dumb enough to be part of a religion and give your money in this way, there's absolutely no protection for you whatsoever. It's almost like they're saying, you know, it's on you. If you couldn't see it, we can't help you.
Well, it's almost like they're saying the First Amendment means it.
Okay, there is that. Any thoughts, Bill?
I think we're to the point where we're about at the end of losing all hope that there will be any chance of any of this getting through. And
well, the good news is the nation is swinging back to religiosity, so they won't worry about it anyway.
I think one thing that Mormonism is learning, the LDS Church is learning specifically, is that it really can do pretty much anything, and at worst, it'll get a slap on the wrist. So, I guess that's the freedom of religion that we have in this country.
Mm-hmm. But don't judge everything that's going on by the court rulings. They're at DEFCON 4 at least at the church headquarters, and have been for a number of years, over the fact that people are abandoning the church, trying to come up with ways to cover it, trying to find up ways to address it, but they end up just slapping, you know, Band-Aids on what is hemorrhaging, and it's not working. And they're at wit's end because they only have this playbook that's been around since the 1940s, and it's never been updated.
They do change things as if they do care some about hanging on to members. I'll also note that all of us would agree that if it was us individually, I'm not talking about being a system that's unhealthy and justifying that, but more money and less people is never a bad thing. Just FYI.
It's always funny to me how it seems like the active LDS feel that somehow that tithing money, they have ownership over it still, that hoard, right? Someday it's going to come back to them. I really believe deep down, a lot of them believe that somehow. Those people have probably never been out of a job and went to the church for help and found out that there really isn't that much help. But it is interesting to see. And I will say what you say about the pendulum, religiosity swinging, like my co-host says, if I can quote him again, it's not religious freedom, it's religious privilege. And we see that everywhere in temple building, in tithing lawsuits, all of it. And that kind of leads into my next story. Again, I'm not going to talk about temples, but I am going to talk about something being built. Now, this is a story I've been following for a while. It's been going on for about a month. I'd like to thank all the people that email me little updates on this. I was kind of waiting for something to kind of come to a little more of a conclusion before I podcasted about it here. But this is about a seminary building in Arizona that is being built on school district property. So if we can roll this little video, this kind of gives us some background, and then I'll do a little update on what has just happened in this last week.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Pat Paris. Heidi has the evening off. We recently shared a story about the Vail School Board allowing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to build a seminary building on the Cienega High School campus. Dozens of community members continue to express their concerns over the plan. They say they're worried about the separation of church and state with the seminary being built on campus. Others advocating for the benefits to students who are part of the LDS Church.
And I have to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning to go to seminary, and it's super tiring.
Now, in the Vail School District saying it's the student's choice to participate.
And we're not forcing anyone to participate. It's just being made available to students with those beliefs.
Now, continuing coverage now on the plans approved by the Vail School Board last week. Some say it violates the Constitution, while others are excited for what this might do for the community. KGO9's Raina Preciado breaks down both sides for us.
The separation of church and state is the focus of this cease and desist letter written to Vail Unified School District after it was unanimously approved by the school board to build an LDS seminary on one of the campuses. A flood of concerns on social media, starting the conversation about these plans set to be complete by January 2026 at Cienega High School. Now a statewide organization is taking action with this letter to VUSD, saying it violates the state and federal constitutions by allowing religion to be taught on campus.
You may not have a public school favoring a particular religion.
Diane Post says she's had 5 different people reach out to her with concerns. VUSD superintendent says it won't affect anyone who won't use the space.
We serve 15,000 students. We have 23 different schools. We have 2 million square feet of space in our school district. And we're talking about adding a classroom and some storage space.
Students and parents KGUN 9 spoke to in support of these plans say it would remove a 30-minute one-way commute to the nearest seminary, where students take religious classes in place of an elective. The school district says it's following the law, defending the decision they say will not come at any cost to taxpayers.
It is simply intended to serve those children who are in our schools already and their families, and do so in a way that doesn't impact anybody else, that there's appropriate separation.
Reporting in Vail, Raina Preciado, KGUN 9.
So this was a couple weeks ago.
I love the way
you have
they
a comment, RFM?
Yeah, I love the way they said that they got the people on both sides. Some of them are saying it's unconstitutional, and the other people saying it's a really cool thing to do.
Exactly. I hear a little bit of an echo, Bill. Do you hear that? Is it just me?
It's you.
No, I think it's. I had to turn the sound off once we shared that screen, so it should be gone now. Sorry about that.
I love to hear the sound of my own voice. There it is. So, yeah, and how they say, this will benefit, well, some of the students and some of the parents. So, anyway, a very interesting scenario. People are kind of weighing in different ways, and the point here is that this was passed by the school board, a 5-member school board, and a lot of people didn't really know that this was happening. So, there's been a follow-up article, if I can just read this on the slides. Again, this is just a little kind of a microcosm of how this all works. So it says Arizona School District could walk back the plan to build Mormon Seminary at the high school, because I don't think they've realized that there would be so much pushback when they just said, let's do this. This will be great. This is perfect. And again, this is a seminary building for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints built on school land. And we'll talk about a little bit later how it works in Utah and most places. It is never built on the school land. There are little workarounds. It's by the school, but it's not on school land, and that's the difference here. Right. So the key points are that the Vail School District could reconsider a decision, like I said, already made, to lease the land on a high school campus to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for a seminary building. The parents and community members expressed concerns about the separation of church and state, lack of transparency in the decision-making process, basically happened without anyone knowing, and the potential use of public funds. While the district maintains the agreement is legal and beneficial, Superintendent John Carruth, who we saw right there, acknowledged the community's frustration and pledged to revisit the issue at the school board. So what we saw was from a couple weeks ago where he's like, this is great. I think then he got a couple phone calls, and now he's like, yeah, we might want to look at this a little closer. So the article,
they might want to invite a constitutional lawyer to visit with the city council when they're talking about it.
Yes, exactly. And that group filed that suit, or that, intention to say that this is not separation of church and state. It says the building would be owned and operated by the district as a community room space, but the district entered into a 10-year lease agreement with the church, and there would be an option to extend for another 9.5 years. Now, I was thinking that's interesting. So the church can use it for 10 years, perhaps 19 years. And I think that probably takes you up to the second coming. So they're covered right there. I think that's probably what they're thinking.
And the church is probably footing the bill for the materials and labor, right?
Exactly. Yep. They're going to build it. And this is where it all gets a little complex, because on the surface you'd go, well, why not? That's nice. The church or the school is going to get this building that they'll be able to use in the coming decades.
But I think all of that is ultimately irrelevant.
It actually, I think it is. Yeah. And
none of that has anything to do with whether it's constitutional.
Exactly.
I think the more interesting question would be if they had sold that plot of ground to the church
Yeah,
even
well,
though
and
it's carved out right next to the
yep,
school, and then the
yep.
church built on it.
And we'll get into that because that's kind of how they do it in Utah, some of the ways. So outside of the lease agreement giving the church use between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays, the facility could be used for other school programs or community needs. So they would have some access to it. According to district documents, the church would also pay the district a monthly fee for rental, utility, and maintenance costs. So again, what's wrong with this, right? On the surface. So then it says, let's see, community concerns. Sorry, I'm reading through my notes here. Hold on a second. I've got so many pages this time.
Yes,
Okay.
and my answer for you while you're looking for it, Rebecca, when you say what's wrong with that is other than the Constitution and the First Amendment, nothing.
There you go. Nothing. Okay. Yep. Did I just read that? Okay. So it says, so this article talks about how a rural Arizona school board could revisit a decision to build the seminary for the church on a high school campus after the frustration and anger from parents boiled over at a listening session. So basically what happened is they passed it, and then, you're slapped with that organization that sent them kind of a cease and desist. You've got parents calling, and then they're like, okay, we'll have a listening session. Let's hear what the people have to say. But again, it's already been passed. The session on April 16th culminated in Vail School District Superintendent John Carruth, who we saw before, indicating he would take the community concerns to the district board where they could decide if they kind of wanted to walk it back, right, as they listen to people.
So
He
Rebecca,
said,
do you wonder if, like in Cody, once they've passed it, they can't go back and undo it?
see, and that's an issue too that they're going to have to revisit. Absolutely, because it is passed. So the superintendent says, as soon as we heard that there was concern, we opened up to the public and said, hey, come in, tell us what your concerns are. Not quite sure why that didn't happen before this decision was made. And if we need to walk a decision back, we will walk it back, he says. So they're definitely backpedaling. About 60 parents and residents filled in a room at the Vail School District office to voice their concerns about a contract between the district and the church, widely known as the Mormon Church. And again, it would permit this construction of the 1,300 square foot seminary on the campus. Now, it's interesting. There's a lot, I'm just kind of skimming the surface here. There's a lot of different concerns that are pretty valid. Here it says, retired teachers and residents and parents of students and former students said they felt enraged, frustrated, and disenfranchised with how the agreement with the church was carried out. The superintendent told them that while the agreement with the church had been signed, the district is functionally in a paused state moving forward. So they're definitely backpedaling and taking a break.
Oh, really? An agreement with the church has been signed. That sounds like a contract.
Yeah, it does sound like, I know. See, from the legal perspective, you're seeing this for what it is. So the community concerned about the separation of church and state. Now we're going to kind of get into what the people are saying. Most people who spoke at the meeting, the listening meeting, said they were concerned about the separation of church and state in the public schools. Retired teacher and librarian Diana Roche was one of those people. I'm not against the church at all. Where do we hear this over and over? It has nothing to do with that. It's this idea that it should not be on a school campus during school instruction time, she said. That's one of the concerns. And they went on to say in other parts of the article and some of the other ones that I read, they're concerned with who are these adults that are going to be there on campus? Who are these seminary teachers? Who vets them? Are they going to have access to our other students? Will there be missionaries that will be around the building that might be talking to students that, aren't part of the seminary? All these are very valid concerns because you're bringing this building onto school property. And we all know that school property has very specific parameters, protecting the kids, who can be there, what kind of person can be there. So they're definitely concerned about, leaders, missionaries. What is this exactly? Attendees said the decision lacked transparency and they worried it could cost taxpayers. Attendees asked the superintendent why the agreement was not brought before the public before the school board voted to execute the contract in March. If you had little breakout sessions about this little problem before it all erupted, we feel like 13 years of this has been planned behind our back. And now it is being snuck, the librarian said. And another part of the article did say they had been working on this for 13 years, just kind of, in the background. And then
the answer is because they hope nobody would notice.
Exactly.
It's so naive. They thought they could sneak in an unconstitutional religious building on a state government property, public school, and everybody would just be okay with it. Nobody would really know. And it would be just a huge benefit and everybody would be happy. Yes, they've got to be Mormons.
I was just going to go to that. You always steal my thunder. Gosh
Oh,
darn
I'm
it.
sorry. I didn't mean
No,
to.
I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Someone was
Because of
saying that
course
in the
that's
live
the
chat.
logical conclusion. The superintendent went on to say that informal conversations in the foyers of church. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. Informal conversations were happening off and on for 13 years, but there was no definitive plan to move forward until just about 7 or 8 months ago. Once the proposal moved forward, it was placed on the agenda for discussion at public meetings and posted on the district website. So he's saying there was some information about it, but it seems like it might have been, who goes on, well, except for me, and reads agendas of city meetings and things like that. One of the parents said many in the community were not even aware of the agreement until she posted about it on Facebook. So now I did feel for that little kid that was, on the video, because I agree. I had to get up for seminary at 5:30 in the morning, and I still don't think I've honestly recovered from that. Honestly, I reread my journals from that area because I did keep journals. And all I said is, I'm so tired. Every single entry starts out, I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I can't think straight. I can't even see. I can't. So I get this. But of course, the question that you ask, RFM, who was talking about this for so many years? Why this push? Why everyone's so excited? So we decided to look at the school board. There are 5 members of the school board. I was able to confirm that 2 of them are absolutely LDS, and a third probably is too. Whether or not that allegedly had any impact on this, I will leave anybody to make up
It
their
obviously
own mind.
did.
It couldn't
Even
hurt.
I would say that, and I tend to be trying to be careful. Obviously, this is Mormon from beginning to end. And 13 years ago, that's BS too. They're trying to give it some kind of a pedigree. Yeah, maybe somebody mentioned it offhand 13 years ago, and it was never brought up until last December, and then they hit the pedal on it and snuck it in under the radar.
Yeah.
It sure as hell didn't hurt, did it?
No, it did not hurt whatsoever. And so I was very curious, how does seminary, because most of us in Utah, our kids went to a seminary building that was right next to their junior high or right next to the high school. So I realized that I wasn't really clear on how that happened. So I did a little quick research right before the newscast. And it says in Utah, and I think in other places, Idaho, probably, Arizona, maybe every other place, the LDS Church typically purchases land near the school for seminary buildings through a combination of direct purchase and collaboration with the school district. And of course, my co-host Landon, who's very cynical, brought up, I'm pretty sure they're probably tipped off when a school's going in, hey, we got a nice parcel for you over here, or, we'll make sure that there's a piece of it, because there is always a seminary building next to the school. So what direct purchase means is the church can purchase land directly from private individuals or businesses, right next to the school, just like any other real estate transaction. A collaboration with the school board could mean that in some cases, the school board will acquire land and then sell a specific parcel to the church. And I think that's probably how it happens. New junior high going in Highland, Utah. Let's make sure we let the church know, here's a parcel you can acquire for your seminary building. This allows the church to establish a seminary building near the school without necessarily being directly on school property. And that is the difference here. This building is going directly on school property. So here is a survey or a petition that people can sign. I think people are just kind of starting to be made aware of this. And again, it's that church and state argument. So we will continue to follow this. Any thoughts on this, Bill or RFM? Again, these little things, it's small, but it's kind of a microcosm for a bigger method of operation, I find.
I think ultimately they can talk all day long about the benefits to the school and the benefits to the Mormon youth who are going sleep deprived. But the bottom line is, I think what it comes down to is who owns the property.
Yep.
2 things. One is, doesn't it work this way in Utah? Aren't there seminary buildings on public school grounds all over the place?
No, that's what I just read. They are on a private parcel next to the school.
In every instance, private parcel next to the school.
Yeah.
Yes, because otherwise, Bill, it would be against the Constitution.
Exactly. That's why this is unique. That's why this is unique. And that's why I had to look it up, because I thought, in fact, that picture that I have right here is of the seminary building that my kids went to. And it was right there, right next to the junior high. And I was like, how does this happen? And it looks like when buildings are being built, a parcel is offered to the church, or perhaps there's a private individual. Maybe it is the church, a shell company. But they always seem to be able to do it, but it's not built on the school property. That's what's different here.
I'm just noting that Utah schools work hand in hand
Yes.
with the church in order to have seminary buildings at every school property. Again, not on the property, but okay, within 100 feet. And then I just wanted to note too, it's always been a pet peeve of mine for decades. I'll just voice it here so I can get it out for the first time ever. I'm deeply bothered by the church's use of the word seminary. Seminary, by definition, is college instruction for people to be priests or rabbis. And Mormonism uses it as a way to say that our members get trained and learn and informed. And really, it's just brainwashing, programming, and indoctrination for the young people of the church. It in no way, shape, or form is seminary as defined by the way the world uses that word.
Well, even in the Mormon church, you have to graduate. You don't have to, but you should graduate from seminary in order to become an elder.
You should.
You should. Well, and you know, I was going to say, I've been studying the requirements for seminary graduation because they were pretty rigorous when, I guess you guys didn't do it because you joined when you were older, but I mean, you had to read that full book you were studying, the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the D&C, all kinds of scripture mastery. And, you know, in more recent years, there have been tests that you have to take. If you don't pass the test, you don't pass seminary. I've been kind of gathering this information, hopefully for an episode soon, but they have watered down those requirements. I mean, it's almost nothing now to graduate. Then it was a guided test with your teacher and all the other students sharing answers. I don't even think there is a test anymore. It's pretty crazy. It tells me that the students and even the parents were just saying, we don't have time for this, you know, with how rigorous education is now. And so I kind of see, having had my kids in seminary as recently as 4 years ago, it's almost a mission prep factory. They really, really hammer that to the boys, especially, and to the girls. They have all kinds of activities geared around serving a mission. It's almost like this a little factory to, you know, get you out onto the mission. So, but I was going to mention one more thing before we move on to Bill's important story next. Do you remember, I think it was probably like a year ago on the newscast when I talked about untrained clergy going into public schools? There were different bills in different states that would allow an individual representing a religion to go into the school to kind of pick up the slack for a school counselor. And of course, almost the very same scenario here. Parents are like, what do you mean an untrained LDS person is going to go in and walk the halls and talk to my students, or an untrained evangelical? You know, it didn't matter the religion. This reminds me of that. And I have to say, I don't know what kind of legislative body they were in front of, but it was the Church of Satan, you know, and they are there to point out these discrepancies, these, you know, incongruent things. And these people were dressed like you would think someone from the Church of Satan were dressed, all in black. And they were addressing the panel and they were saying, we love this idea for this bill. We have signed up for shifts all throughout the day. We are so excited to right there be hand in glove with your students and being able to teach them and work with them, you know, just to point out, you just can't have that. There has to be that separation of church and state, especially with the most vulnerable. And that goes back, I'm going to use the vector word again, to a vector, a conduit for indoctrination. And the most vulnerable are the young. And this is exactly what this is, putting a seminary building on campus. So anyway, that's my soapbox for that. But we'll continue watching this story because I think it is interesting and it represents maybe a bigger picture. So, okay, on to Bill next. Next story, Bill.
All right, just really quick. I want to know, we noted the passing of the Pope at the beginning of the show. Here at the end of the show, we want to note the passing of Never Mormon, probably the most well-known, most notoriety for a Never Mormon historian, Jan Ships. Jan Ships passed away this week, April 14th, 2025. I'll just note here, first non-Mormon president of the Mormon History Association in 1981, worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between Mormon historians and scholars of American religion more generally. Beyond her publications, Ships mentored a generation of Mormon studies scholars and worked to establish the institutional infrastructure for the field, including her involvement in academic conferences, historical associations, and the publication of Mormon Studies volumes. She's most well known for the two books that she put out, Mormonism, The Story of a New Religious Tradition, Jan Ships, author, sojourner in the promised land, 40 years among the Mormons, also, of course, Jan Ships. So just to note her passing, and if anybody does not know who Jan Ships is, you're not reading enough in Mormonism. So she had a lot of impact on Mormon studies in decades past. So that's a big loss for the Mormon community. Okay, that's all I've got for that note.
All right. Yeah, I think it's interesting that never Mormons often know more about Mormonism than Mormons.
They keep it that way.
They keep it that way. That's right. Okay, just one final thing. And I know, oh my goodness, I made a short about this. People probably have already come across this, but on social media, I found this. This is on the church website, and it's a lovely article about lovely people that have been called to be, as they mentioned in the article, mission president and wife. And it says it's an interview with President and Sister Robert Preston. And by all accounts, these people are lovely, wonderful people. And I believe this article has been up for maybe a decade, a long time. But what caught everybody's eye is the cropping of this picture. As you can see, President Robert is shown, his entire, head and upper body. And Sister Robert, as she's mentioned there, is cut off pretty much from the nose down, maybe the middle of the nose down. And, you laugh, but then you don't laugh. Some people went into you can go on the church's website and see this. Some people said, oh, that's got to be, the picture just hasn't been expanded. There's no way they would leave it like this. No, it's cropped like this. Other people thought I did it. I don't know why anyone would think I would do that, because it's not funny if someone does it. The point is, this has been on the church's website for, I think, quite a while, like almost a decade. And I just kind of said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And then I got really snarky and I put up a picture from The Handmaid's Tale.
Yes.
But again, it's just, whoever put this here, it's all about the mission president. It's not about Sister Robert, as she's called there in the headline. Her face doesn't even get to be seen. And we all know, we all just know how important women are in the church, but it's just another reminder that, yeah, go ahead, cut my face off. It's just not as important. And I do have to laugh. I hope this.
But I have to say this before you do have to laugh, okay?
Yeah.
Because we got President Robert Preston. I wonder what happened to Robert Preston. Looks like he's got trouble with a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Now, what made you laugh?
That is a reference to The Music Man, of course, with Robert Preston. Yeah. But again, I have to say, I don't know if everyone knows that. Not everybody knows show tunes like we do. Not everybody's geeked out of their mind like we are. Bill's shaking his head. I don't know what you're talking about. But again, these are lovely people. I hear they were incredible mission president and wife, and it was amazing. I just had to point out just, half a face. Come on.
And then I snuck this one in.
So I made a short about it and I sent it to RFM. And he sent me back a picture. And I was like, why are you sending me back a picture of my own short? But here it is. He literally cut my face off at the nose.
It's kind of meta.
It was kind of meta. It was pretty funny, though. But it took me a minute to get it. I'm like, why is he sending me back my own short? And then I could not stop laughing. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So I think we'll end on that. And anybody can go to the church website, look up this article. Maybe they'll change it. I wish they would, and show her entire beautiful face.
Wouldn't you feel bad if she had like some kind of just horrible mouthpiece, like for braces? I don't know what you call that. And she actually wanted him to cut it. Yeah, the gear. She's got that on. And she didn't want people to know that. So she asked them to edit this. Wouldn't you feel bad if that's what caused this?
Do you know what? I would feel horrible, and I would do a retraction on the air for sure. But notice the space above his head. There's plenty of space. They could have lowered the space above his head.
Or just go back a little bit. Maybe she was in a fight with an alligator and she's missing her lower jaw or something.
The whole mandible could be gone.
Yep. I could have read this all wrong.
She's a woman with no mandible.
Nope, I could have gotten the entire thing wrong, and I apologize if that's the case, but I'm sure they're lovely people. All right. I think that ends the news. Let's very quickly talk about what we have.
There's a philtrum. It's like 9 inches long. Yeah. Amazing.
Oh my gosh. All right. Let's talk about what we have coming up next very quickly. So the next thing is Mormonish podcast. That is tomorrow night. We have an episode we've been trying to get out. I've been teasing everybody about this for like months. It is called The Convenient Revelations of Joseph Smith. We went through and collected all the convenient, how convenient, right? There's an awful lot of them. I think you're going to find this really interesting
Like
to
the
go
word of
through.
wisdom?
Everything that's convenient. I don't have any place to live. Oh, wait. Mine servant Joseph, they're supposed to build you a house with these dimensions, right? There are we had slide after slide after slide, and these were just things we were gathering. I'm sure that there's more that we've missed, but when you see the copiousness of these revelations, you just can't help but recognize the big picture. And then we also kind of delve into, is this still going on today? These convenient revelations. So kind of interesting. All right. And then what do you guys have coming up Wednesday on Mormonism Live?
Tell us all about it, Bill.
Okay, so Wednesday's Mormonism Live, 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time. We are going to talk about all of the break-off factions. So Joseph Smith has a first vision. He takes on the restoration, gives us the one true church, which then turns into about 200 only and true churches on the earth with which the Lord is well pleased. We'll go into some of the lesser known ones, some of the ones that you're very aware of, connect the dots on how these all came to be, and I think do so in an entertaining fashion. So that's that. I do want to note one other thing, because often you, RFM, and I, me for Almost Awakened and you for Radio Free Mormon, are doing things that we don't really know maybe what exactly we're going to do until we get later in the week. So the things that are behind us don't get mentioned. I just want to note Almost Awakened podcast. We just released Sunday morning, I believe it was, Holy Ghosted, The Wounds of Faith. Almost Awakened isn't as well viewed as some of our other shows, Mormonism Live, Radio Free Mormon. But this one in particular seems to be doing pretty well. We go into, Teresa and I go into spiritual and religious abuse, name what that looks like, show people what healing from that looks like. I think it's a really important episode. And then I put up here as well your episode from Saturday to give you a second to mention that and anything else you want to say about what's coming this week.
That was
Thank
so
you,
good.
Thank you. This
That
is
was
another
so good.
huge inroad into Book of Mormon origins, how Joseph Smith did it. And unfortunately, what's happening is that the apologetic arguments in favor of the Book of Mormon from the 1970s and 1980s, when I was doing the apologetic thing, used a number of arguments, and this is one of them, to say this appears in the Book of Mormon. It doesn't appear in the Bible in an analogous text. Therefore, how could Joseph Smith have known? Well, the answer is becoming more and more the Adam Clark Bible commentary. And we'll talk about that. So this is focused. It's 26 minutes or so. It's not more than half an hour. This is a bombshell, because it's one thing for an argument, an apologetic argument for the church based upon ancient text, right? Or whatever. It's one thing for it to fail. That's disappointing enough. But what's even worse is for it to not just fail, but to come back as an argument against the church. In other words, this not only doesn't show that the church is ancient, it actually positively shows the church is modern. Or excuse me, the Book of Mormon, ancient and modern.
No, it was a great episode. I watched it and I highly recommend it. So then we have Thursday night, which is the live stream of it's like every night of the week is something to do with, you guys, us. It's going to be great. And on that live stream, we'll have my co-host for Mormonish Landon joining us. So we'll all weigh in on the different temple commentary. Yeah, it'll be good. And then after that, Mormonism After Dark. And is that Friday or Saturday? I never know.
It's Friday.
Friday, 8 p.m.
You know, the three of us, I think we're kind of like Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and Becky Thatcher.
Becky, there you go. That fits.
So when Landon joins us, who is he? Aunt Polly?
Engine Joe.
Well, there we go.
Maybe. He does have a pocket knife. Yeah.
She just went off the reservation, didn't she, Bill?
Yeah.
Now you're going to have to make a donation.
No, I said engine. See, you don't understand. I, for the last 20 years, have run a youth theater program, and I rewrite, classics to accommodate our group. And I did Tom Sawyer. And of course, I knew the themes and the tones that would not be appropriate for elementary school. So I changed it to Engine Joe, an evil railroad mogul with his railroad renegades. And that was the play. There wasn't a murder like in real Tom Sawyer. There was somebody stole some cash out of a lockbox. So I said Engine, E-N-G-I-N-E, Joe. So there you go.
Very good. Or either Casey Jones or
That's
Brakeman
right.
Bill.
That or Brakemanville. That's exactly it. So, and then you said Saturday night for Mormon? No, Friday
The
night.
Boxcar Willie.
Friday night.
Boxcar Willie. Is Mormonism After Dark always on Friday night? Do I get this wrong?
There are an exception once in a
Okay.
great while, but
Okay.
generally speaking, Friday
Generally.
at 8 p.m.
Okay.
Mostly the exceptions are due to me. So why RFM?
I have no life.
I feel like we should put out a calendar. Honestly, it's every night of the week.
This show is my life.
Maybe folks should just stay on our channel all through the week and leave those other guys alone.
Yeah.
Pretty soon we'll have 24/7 podcasting on this channel.
We should do
I
that.
think we could do it. We
Raise
should have a
donations enough,
telethon,
we'll do it.
like your conference telethon. That was amazing. All right, everybody. Too much fun on the Mormon Newscast. We hope everybody stuck with us and enjoyed it. And like to thank RFM and Bill for co-hosting. This has been wonderful. And we will see you on all those episodes we just described. And then once again, the following Monday for another episode of the Mormon Newscast. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. for next week's Mormon Newscast